I pulled my chair closer to the table, the kind of polished mahogany that smelled faintly of lemon polish and old stories. Candles flickered in crystal holders. The dining room was warm, the air heavy with roast chicken and garlic bread, the clink of silverware just starting to fade. Then my mother-in-law, 77 years old, leaned back in her teal shawl and said it as calmly as if she were announcing the weather. "I sold the house," she said. She paused, then let the next part drop like ice water. "I'll be spending the next 15 years on a yacht." For a second, I thought I had misheard her. The room felt smaller, like the walls had leaned in. My husband shifted beside me, staring at his plate, his jaw tight. A cousin laughed nervously, then fell silent. I forced a smile, my cheeks stiff. My heart pounded like I had sprinted across the block. My phone buzzed in my pocket at that exact moment, as if the universe wanted to underline her words. I didn't check it yet. I just sat there, tasting the bitterness in my mouth. She repeated it louder, as though anyone had dared not believe her. Yes, 15 years. No house, no roots. Just me and the ocean. Inside, it was like someone had yanked the rug out from under me. I wasn't just shocked at the drama of her declaration. I was shaken, because I knew there had to be more. A woman like her never moves without a hidden agenda. Let me tell you, I didn't know then what that buzzing phone in my pocket was about. I didn't know that the message waiting for me would make everything worse. But for now, I just sat there, trying not to show how much my hands were shaking under the tablecloth. If you've ever had a moment where a simple sentence splits your life into before and after, you know the silence that follows. It isn't loud, it isn't shouting. It's the kind of silence that makes you feel like you've stepped off a curb, and the ground hasn't arrived yet. That was me at the table, pretending nothing had cracked, pretending this was just another evening, another announcement, another little storm that would blow over. But it wasn't, because what she hid from me was bigger than a yacht, bigger than 15 years, bigger than anyone at that table could imagine. Before I take you there, before I explain what happened after the phone buzzed, let me rewind. Let's go back to the days before that dinner, back to the part where I thought this evening would be normal, where I thought it was just going to be cake and candles for her birthday, a little laughter, maybe even a rare smile in my direction. I want you to stay with me here, because when the truth came out, it didn't just shake her world, it shook mine. So let's get back to the main character. You'll see how it all started. I had convinced myself it was going to be simple. That's the funny part. I drove over with a plate of brownies wrapped in foil, a little bow on top because I thought presentation might soften her mood. I even picked up a bouquet of lilies on the way, her favorite, or at least that's what she used to say before she started preferring orchids flown in from Florida. The neighborhood was quiet that evening. Porch lights glowing, kids' bikes tipped over in driveways, the faint sound of a television game show leaking from an open window down the street. I parked outside her house, the one she'd lived in for nearly 50 years, the one that still had the swing set rusting in the backyard. I sat in the car for a minute, smoothing my dress and telling myself not to expect too much. Inside, everything looked perfect, at least on the surface. The dining room table stretched long, draped with white linen, polished silver glinting in the candlelight, wine glasses lined up like soldiers. A centerpiece of roses and eucalyptus sat in the middle, probably arranged by a florist. It smelled faintly of garlic and perfume, with a trace of salt from the ocean drifting through the cracked window. Everyone was already there when I arrived. My husband was fiddling with his cufflinks, avoiding my eyes the way he does when he knows I'm walking into a storm. His cousin Linda was swirling her glass of Chardonnay, her laugh a little too sharp, like she was trying to cover tension. My mother-in-law sat at the head of the table in her teal shawl, her hair pinned back with pearl combs, her posture perfect like a queen surveying her kingdom. I thought it would be just another birthday dinner. Some polite small talk, maybe a slice of cake, and then we'd head home. That's what I told myself. I'd even rehearsed compliments in the car. How lovely the table looked, how young she seemed for 77. I was ready to play the dutiful daughter-in-law, the one who never made waves. And yet, there were cracks before the first toast. When I leaned in to hug her, she angled her cheek just out of reach, her smile tight. She glanced at the brownies I set down on the counter and said, "Oh, you didn't have to bring anything. We already have plenty." The words were polite, but the tone was sharp, like she was swatting away a fly. The chairs told another story, too. Around the long table, each place setting gleamed with silver napkin rings and embroidered place cards except mine. I got the chair on the far end, no card, just a plain napkin folded square. It felt like sitting in the overflow section at a wedding. And the conversation? It flowed around me like I wasn't there. She asked Linda about her new job, complimented her shoes, leaned in to hear every detail. She asked my husband about his latest project at work, nodding as though his every word was gold. But when I tried to chime in just a little story about traffic on the way, her eyes slid past me to refill someone's glass. That should have been my first clue. The way she choreographed the evening, every smile and question like steps in a dance I was never meant to join. I sat there, sipping my water, tracing the rim of the glass with my finger, telling myself it was fine. I had learned to live with these little exclusions, the small ways she reminded me that I was temporary, an outsider. But still, I expected the night to be manageable, maybe even pleasant if I kept my head down. I didn't expect her to drop a bomb. I didn't expect her to announce, without blinking, that the house was gone and her future was floating somewhere on a luxury yacht. Looking back, the warning signs were all over the place. The too perfect table, the empty chair card. The way she adjusted her pearl comb right before speaking, like she was about to deliver a line she'd been rehearsing for weeks. I should have known, but in that moment I still thought we were celebrating her 77th birthday. I still thought it was about family, about marking another year together. Instead, it was about her escape. And while everyone else at the table sipped their wine and tried to mask their surprise, I sat frozen, the foil bow from my brownies still tucked in my purse, wondering how this night had turned into something so much bigger. And that's when I realized she hadn't just sold a house. She had set something in motion none of us were prepared for. We'll get there. But first, let's step back into the history that made her words hit me harder than anyone else in the room. Because this wasn't just about property or retirement. It was about years of unspoken battles and how one sentence could drag them all back to the surface. This wasn't the first time she had stunned me with a choice that left everyone else nodding politely while I sat there choking on the silence. That dinner announcement about the yacht was only the latest chapter in a long story, one she had been writing for years, sentence by sentence, slight by slight. To understand why my stomach dropped harder than anyone else's, you need to know what came before. The first year I married into the family, I wanted so badly to belong. I showed up to every gathering with gifts, baked goods, little touches I thought would make me seem thoughtful. At Thanksgiving, I remember carefully arranging a pie I had baked from scratch, setting it right in the middle of the dessert table. She walked in, looked at it, and said, "Oh, store-bought would have been fine." Then she slid the pie to the side, placed her own dish in the center, and never mentioned it again. Everyone else just followed her lead, as if the pie had never existed. Another time, early in my pregnancy, she announced in front of my husband's cousins that I already looked exhausted and that a baby doesn't need a tired mother. I laughed it off at the time, my cheeks burning, pretending I didn't care. But I carried those words with me for months, through every sleepless night and doctor's visit. The most cutting memory, though, was one Christmas Eve. We were all gathered in the living room, the tree lit up, presents piled high. I had spent weeks picking out a scarf for her, soft wool in her favorite shade of turquoise. When it was her turn, she opened the box, looked at it briefly, then set it aside and said, "Money can't buy taste." The room went quiet for a second, then someone cleared their throat, and the evening rolled on. But inside, I felt something break. I had tried, I had stretched my budget, poured my heart into a gift, and she dismissed it with one sentence. So when she sat at that birthday table in her shawl and announced she had sold the family home, it didn't just feel like a personal choice. It felt like another dismissal. Another way of saying nothing I thought mattered actually did. The irony was that my husband never seemed to notice. To him, she was just his mother, a little sharp sometimes, but aging, eccentric. To me, she was a storm I had to live under. He'd tell me, "She doesn't mean it that way," or "You're overthinking." But when you've been cut 100 times, you don't need someone to stab you with a knife. A single word is enough. It was always small things, too. At family photos, she would place her hand firmly on my husband's shoulder, then adjust her stance so I was half hidden behind someone taller. When she told stories from the past, she would glance over me, like I wasn't even in the room. At one reunion, she actually introduced me to a distant cousin as the one he married, no name, no acknowledgement of who I was. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was strong enough to live with a little exclusions, but they pile up. They always do. You don't feel the weight at first. It's like snow on a roof. Soft, quiet, harmless. Until one day, it's heavy enough to crack the beams. That's why the yacht announcement landed differently for me. Everyone else at the table was surprised, maybe even amused. Her cousin Linda raised her eyebrows, muttered something about adventure. My husband just pinched the bridge of his nose like he was tired. But me? I felt the years of little cuts pressing down, pushing all at once. Because selling the house wasn't just selling property. It meant erasing the place where my husband grew up, where I had tried to find footing, where I thought family might still mean something. It was her way of saying she didn't care who lived under that roof, who gathered around that table, who baked pies or wrapped scarves. It was about her, always her. I had lived with that pattern long enough to know better. The pattern was simple. She made a move, people adjusted, and I was left picking up the pieces. She never apologized. She never explained. She just moved on, leaving me to swallow the bitterness alone. So when she lifted her glass and smiled after telling us about the yacht, it wasn't just shocking. It was familiar. Too familiar. It was the same performance I had watched for years, dressed in new words. And I knew, deep in my gut, that what she had said wasn't the whole story. There was something else hidden, something bigger than her dramatic announcement. I couldn't name it yet, but I felt it in my chest, the same way you can smell rain before the storm breaks. She was hiding something. And soon enough, I was going to find out. The dining room was suddenly too quiet, like all the oxygen had been sucked out with her words. The chandelier above us flickered faintly, the shadows on the walls shifting as if the house itself was unsettled. My husband stared at the tablecloth, tracing a line along the embroidery like it held an answer he couldn't give out loud. His cousin Linda leaned back in her chair, her wine glass tilting just a little too far, her eyes darting toward me as if she wanted to gauge my reaction before showing her own. But my mother-in-law? She looked perfectly calm. She had her hands folded neatly, her pearl combs catching the candlelight, her lips curved in a smile that wasn't joy, not even pride, it was control. It was the smile of someone who had planned every detail of this reveal, down to the pause between house and yacht. I tried to speak, but the words got stuck in my throat. Finally, I managed. What about us? What about your son? My voice came out softer than I wanted, but the room was so quiet it carried anyway. She didn't even flinch. She just looked at me, her eyes sharp, her chin lifting slightly. That's none of your concern. The way she said it, like I was a stranger intruding on her evening, cut deeper than any insult she'd ever thrown. The room shifted again. Silverware clinked faintly as someone set down a fork. My chest tightened, but on the outside, I forced myself still. Across from me, Linda tried to fill the silence with a shaky laugh. Well, that's exciting. A yacht? Wow. That's something. But nobody joined in. Even the laugh died awkwardly in the air, like smoke dissipating. I looked around the table, my husband's shoulders slumped, his face unreadable. His aunt cleared her throat, her eyes fixed firmly on her glass of water. The younger cousin leaned toward his phone, pretending to check a message. Everyone was pretending this was normal, that this wasn't a declaration that would change everything. Meanwhile, the phone in my pocket buzzed again. I pressed my hand against it, feeling the vibration echo in my palm. I wanted to look, to distract myself, but I didn't dare. Not with her watching. Not with those eyes on me, waiting to see if I'd break. So I sat there, breathing slowly, tasting the metallic edge of the air, pretending my heart wasn't racing. My fingers curled into the fabric of my dress under the table, gripping tight, holding myself together. She raised her glass then, slow and deliberate, the ruby liquid catching the light. To freedom, she said. Her voice was steady, clear. To the next 15 years, to the ocean, to living life fully. I Ming. The glasses lifted hesitantly. My husband's hand shook slightly as he joined in, though his eyes never left the table. Linda clinked her glass too loudly, the sound jarring in the silence. I lifted mine as well, though it barely touched my lips. I thought of the swing set rusting in the backyard, the family photos on the mantel, the smell of Christmas pine in that very room. All of it erased with a single sail. All of it traded for a yacht I had never seen, never been invited to step on. And that's when my phone buzzed a third time, stronger, insistent. Something about the rhythm made me uneasy. I slipped it from my pocket, angling it under the table. A message notification glowed on the screen. My throat tightened as I read the preview. Words about contracts, about money, about signatures. I blinked hard, the text swimming in front of me. My stomach lurched. I set the phone face down on my lap and looked back up at her. She was watching me now, her lips still curved, but her eyes holding something colder. She knew. Somehow, she knew. No one else noticed the way her fingers tapped against her glass, a slow, deliberate rhythm. No one else saw the way her gaze locked onto me, daring me to react, daring me to ruin her performance. The candles flickered again, a draft slipping through the half-open window. Somewhere in the distance, a car horn blared and then faded. But inside it was silent except for the faint hum of her words still hanging in the air. She had made her move, and she was daring me to make mine. I didn't know yet what that message meant. I didn't know what exactly had been hidden, who had signed what, or why my name wasn't anywhere on it. But in that moment, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't about freedom. It wasn't about adventure. It was about control. And whatever was coming next, it was going to shatter far more than a family dinner. The toast ended, but the tension didn't fade. The clinking glasses sounded hollow, like metal against stone. I lowered mine quickly, the stem of the glass slick against my fingers. She sipped her wine slowly, watching me over the rim, savoring not the drink but the silence she had created. My phone sat on my lap, the screen still glowing faintly. I couldn't bring myself to unlock it yet, not with her staring. But I knew whatever waited inside was connected to this. The timing wasn't random. Nothing about her ever was. Then my husband finally spoke, his voice low, almost apologetic. "Mom, 15 years? On a yacht? That's..." He stopped himself, like he realized halfway through that finishing the sentence might make things worse. His hand rested flat on the table, the knuckles pale. She gave a small shrug, elegant and dismissive. "Why not? At my age, what's left to wait for? You think I should sit in that house until it crumbles? Until I do?" She laughed lightly, the kind of laugh that doesn't invite agreement but demands it. The others nodded slowly. Linda smiled thinly, as though she admired the boldness. The aunt murmured, "Well, you deserve it," but the words rang false, empty, like lines read from a script. I leaned forward slightly, unable to keep my voice steady. "And what about family? About the people who thought that house mattered?" Her eyes snapped to mine. Sharp, cold. Family comes and goes. Houses come and go. What matters is living while you can. It wasn't the words themselves, it was the way she said them. Like she was declaring victory, like I had challenged her and she had won. I pressed my palm against my phone, the vibration echoing again, my nerves fraying with each buzz. I finally swiped the screen open under the table. One glance at the message was enough to send a rush of heat to my face. It was a notification from the lawyer's office. Not mine, hers. Documents had been finalized. The sale wasn't just for the house. There were transfers, accounts shifted, names erased and replaced. And one name stood out, bold on the screen, a name that wasn't hers. My chest tightened. I nearly dropped the phone. I looked back up, trying to mask the shock. But she saw it. She tilted her head, the faintest smirk curling her lips, as if to say, "Yes, I know exactly what you just read." My husband noticed too, finally lifting his gaze from the table. "What is it?" he whispered. His voice was soft, but it cut through the silence. Everyone turned toward me. I froze, caught between telling the truth and holding it back. The air in the room was too heavy, too charged. My heart pounded so loud I was sure they could all hear it. She set down her glass with a soft click. "Well?" she asked. Her tone was sweet, almost mocking. "Do you have something to add?" The words tasted bitter as I swallowed them down. I forced a small smile and shook my head. "Not yet." Her smirk widened, satisfied. She leaned back in her chair, adjusting her shawl like a queen, settling into her throne. The others went back to their food, conversation trickling back slowly, awkwardly, like water finding its way through cracks. But I couldn't eat. I couldn't breathe normally. My mind was racing, replaying the details from the message, the name that shouldn't have been there. She hadn't just sold the house. She had funneled everything, every cent, every asset into something else, something tied to someone I didn't recognize. And the worst part? She wanted me to know. It wasn't an accident that the message came during dinner. It wasn't bad timing. It was staged. Just like the toast, just like the missing place card, just like the way she announced it twice so no one could pretend they misheard. She wanted me to see, to feel the ground slip under my feet, and to keep quiet anyway. I sat there, staring at my untouched plate, the smell of roasted garlic turning my stomach. Around me, laughter flickered back into place, thin and fragile. But every time her eyes met mine, I felt the weight of what I now carried. The consequences hadn't landed yet. Not fully, but they would. Because once that name surfaced, once the truth about what she had really done came out, it wouldn't just be her yacht setting sail. It would be the entire family, torn apart, dragged into waters none of us had chosen. And sitting there, my phone still warm in my hand, I knew one thing. This was only the beginning. The dinner wound down the way family dinners always do, slowly, awkwardly, with the scrape of forks on porcelain and half-finished glasses of wine left behind. But this time the air was heavier, sticky with unspoken things. Every laugh sounded hollow, every smile strained. My husband kept checking his watch, desperate for an excuse to leave, while I sat there, clutching my phone like it was an anchor. She was still at the head of the table, glowing in the candlelight, looking every bit like someone who had orchestrated the evening exactly as she wanted. When dessert came out, chocolate cake with raspberry filling, she declined with a wave of her hand. "I need to keep fit for my new life," she said lightly. The others chuckled politely, but I heard the edge in her voice. It wasn't just a joke, it was a reminder. A reminder that she was leaving, that she had chosen her freedom, and that none of us had a say. After the plates were cleared, people drifted into the living room, small groups forming around the fireplace and the couch. The younger cousins argued over a football game on television, the aunt fussed with the leftover flowers, and my husband busied himself helping gather dishes. I stayed at the table, still staring at the message on my phone. The name on the contract glared back at me like a spotlight in the dark. It wasn't her name. It wasn't anyone I knew. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that was the point. This wasn't just about her selling a house. It was about her rewriting the story of who she belonged to, who she trusted, who she chose to carry with her into the next chapter. And clearly, that wasn't me. Finally, I stood, slipping my phone into my bag, and walked toward the window. Outside, the yard was dark. The swing set a silhouette against the neighbor's floodlight. For years, I had tried to see this house as home. I had planted flowers in the front bed, trimmed the hedges, hung lights at Christmas. All the while, I was trying to prove I belonged here. But tonight, the truth was undeniable. She hadn't just sold the house. She had erased me from it. My husband came over quietly, resting a hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay?" he whispered. His face was drawn, tired, uncertain. He wanted me to nod, to reassure him that everything was fine. But I couldn't lie, not tonight. I just looked at him, my eyes heavy, and shook my head. We left soon after, our goodbyes muted. She hugged him, patted his cheek, whispered something I couldn't hear. When it was my turn, she simply nodded, her smile faint and knowing. She didn't need words. Her silence told me everything. In the car, the night air felt sharp, almost cleansing. The engine hummed as we pulled out of the driveway. I finally unlocked my phone again, reading the message in full this time. The contracts weren't just for the sale of the house, they tied into bank accounts, trusts, assets I hadn't even known existed, and all of them now bore a name that was a stranger's to me. I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. My husband glanced over, his hands gripping the wheel. "What is it?" he asked again. I could have told him. I could have read the name aloud, shattered whatever illusion he still held, but I didn't, not yet. Because in that moment, I realized the power wasn't in revealing what I knew, it was in holding it. For once, I had something she didn't expect me to have: knowledge. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step toward breaking the cycle she had trapped me in for years. I looked out the window at the dark highway stretching ahead, the streetlights flickering like breadcrumbs leading us home. My voice was steady when I finally said, "She's not just moving onto a yacht, she's leaving something behind." He didn't press me for more. Maybe he sensed I wasn't ready to share. Maybe he was afraid of what I might say. Either way, the silence that settled between us felt different from the silence at the dinner table. This one wasn't heavy, it was mine. And here's the thing, I don't know what she thought she gained by cutting me out. I don't know if she believed her 15 years on the ocean would erase the past, or if she imagined she could control the story forever. But I do know this: she underestimated me. For years I let her words chip away at me, let her choices make me small. I stayed quiet, patient, trying to fit into a space she never intended for me. Tonight, though, as we drove away from the house that was no longer hers, I felt something shift. Not anger, not even grief, just clarity. I understood that her yacht, her contracts, her grand escape weren't the end of my story. They were the end of hers. So I leaned back in the seat, closed my eyes, and let the hum of the car carry me forward. Behind me was a house that wasn't mine, a dinner that had turned into a battlefield, a woman who thought she held all the cards. Ahead of me was something else, something freer. And maybe one day, when the truth about those contracts comes out, when the family finally sees what she's hidden, they'll realize what I realized that night. That sometimes the real inheritance isn't money or property. It's the strength you find when you stop waiting for someone else to give you a place at the table. That night, I didn't know what the next chapter would look like. I just knew it wouldn't be written by her.